The teachings of Rabbi Ephraim Sprecher, Dean of Students at Diaspora Yeshiva on Mount Zion, Jerusalem.
Today's shir is about the Yeitzer Hara, the master of disguise. What do I mean? Purim is coming up, right, Chava? Purim's coming. Actually, Purim should be this week. It's Purim Katan is this week, right? But the Yeitzer Hara is the master of disguise. What do I mean by that, the master of disguise? Remember the story of David and Bathsheba, a very strange incident. David and Bathsheba, where she had a get, and people didn't know she had a get, and he took her, and then he had her husband knocked off. Not a nice story there, right? Not a nice. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin 107 has a very strange comment of Yosef. It says that King David begged God, he pleaded with God, please don't put the story of David and Bathsheba in the book. They made a movie out of it. David and Bathsheba. Right? They made a pretty... So David knew that. So he said, do me a favor, God. Please do not put the story of me and Bathsheba in Tanakh. Leave it out. Why include it in Tanakh? Finished chain. How do you say that in English? Not so nice, right? Whatever he did there, even though she technically had a get, right? So please leave it out. Don't embarrass me. I'm the king of Israel. I'm the Mashiach. Why couldn't Tanakh be just one chapter less? Right? One chapter less. So God answered him, no, it stays in the book. Sorry. This story of you and Bathsheba is part of Tanakh. The question is why? Why do we have to learn about the ugly incident of the Melech HaMashiach, King David, the sweet singer of Israel, the Mashiach, the greatest of the great? Why do we have to have this sordid story in Tanakh? Why couldn't God leave it out?
Because even the best sin.
Okay. Yes, very good. But there's much more than that, of course. We'll see something amazing. Fasten your seatbelts. Yes?
Besides that,
go ahead.
Mashiach, the one we're expecting now, is the child of that union.
Okay, but David HaMelech is the Mashiach, whether it's himself or reincarnation of David. There are no perfect people, as Rabbi Yosef said, right? There are no perfect people. Even the greatest sin. And the Gemara in Sukkah says something strange on page 52, David, you can look it up. The greater a person sins, the greater a person is. The greater is his Yeitzer Hara. We don't look at it that way. But the greater a person is spiritual, says the Gemara in Sukkah 52, the greater is his Yeitzer Hara. Because otherwise he'd be a robot. If a person is spiritually great, the Yeitzer Hara has to be up there, otherwise it will be no contest, no pain, no gain, Avram, right? Who said that? No pain, no gain. Rav Tzadok HaKohen, the great Kabbalist from Lublin, has an amazing insight. There's a strange medrash. The medrash says that a HaKadosh Baruch Hu, before he created this world, Boinai Olamos Umachrivan, God built worlds and he destroyed them. The medrash says 7 times. Yes, Avram? This is the 7th world. Before that, God experimented. Boina alamot umachrivan. He built worlds and he said, gee, this is not good. He destroyed them. And then the 7th one, he finally said, Tov ma'od. This one is very good. Implying that the others that he made, Chava, were not good. So what's the message? Didn't God know it's not going to work out?
What was not good about him?
We'll talk about it. What about the Mabul? Right? The Mabul's a failure too, right? God created mankind and he wiped it out. Why couldn't God start with Noah? Why do we have to know all the sorry details of man's failure, the flood, and God's... Remember that song, I'm starting over. What's the message? Why did God have to write that it didn't work out for him either? He built 7 worlds and he destroyed them, the Medrash says. And even when he built this world, it was a failure until the flood. And he had started over with whom? With Noach. Therefore, mankind is called B'nai Noach. They're not called B'nai Adam. Why is the mankind of not called B'nai Adam? Because Adam was a failure. Who was the new Adam? Noach. So mankind is called B'nai Noach. So what's the message? Why does God have to tell me this?
It's about spiritual evolution.
Good. But why tell me about it? Why does God have to write about himself that Kaviyachol didn't work out for him either? What is the message? Why tell me?
Encourage us.
Beautiful, Chava. Says Rav Tzaddik HaKohen Milublin in 1902. Any great Kabbalist, any good that is found in the world is only because first you failed. And then from the failure comes the success. God is teaching us that no good can be accomplished in this world unless first you what? Fail. We'll see how this works out.
Now I feel better.
Nothing is achieved, David, in Gashmius or Ruchnius, how do you say it in English? In material matters and in spiritual matters. Nothing is achieved unless first you fail. Every invention is by trial and error. Without error, there is no success. Hashem says to King David, you think your story at Bathsheba doesn't belong in Tanakh? You think you're the great Mashiach, that you're perfect? Your failure belongs in Tanakh, because nothing is achieved without errors and mistakes. We fail, but we learn from our failure. Yerida l'tzorech aliyah. How do you say that in English? You have to go down in order what? To come up again. It's a Kabbalistic idea. And the Pasuk in Mishlei says, Shev al yipol tzadik. The tzaddik will fall 7 times. And 7, Even Ezra says in Tanakh, means many. The comes. Why is he called a tzaddik? Because he keeps getting up. In the Baal Shem Tov says that's not pshat. Baal Shem Tov says only when a person falls 7 times and he's not miyayesh, how do you say that, Chanoch? He doesn't fall into despair. He keeps getting up despite his failure. Only then is he called what? Tzaddik. And Pusik in Mishlei, Shev al yipol tzaddik. And 7 means many times in Tanakh, says Even Ezra. So only when a person falls 7 times, and he doesn't fall into despair, he doesn't give up, he keeps trying to do better, then he's called a tzaddik. Now this is true, Chava, in the Gashmius world. We know whatever is true in the material world is true in the spiritual world. Chava, let's think about the Gashmius world. When you want to build any wooden utensil, you want to build a beautiful dining room table, a beautiful break front. First you have to cut down and destroy a beautiful living tree. No, David? You want a beautiful dining room table made out of wood, cherry wood. First you have to cut down a living, beautiful tree. Chop it off, chop it up, and then you make a beautiful bookcase or dining room table. But you're destroying a beautiful tree, a living tree, Avram. If you don't do that, you won't have a beautiful bookcase. Would it put your sforim, would you? Why couldn't you just have a bookcase without destroying a tree? Or a beautiful dining room table of shalom without destroying a tree? What's the message? What's the message? That this world is all about what?
Transformation.
All about what? Boinai alamosu machrivan. In order to build, first you have to what? Destroy. And who taught us that? The big boss. Because he built 7 worlds, Avram, and he destroyed them. And even the Mabul, this world, was a washout.
Well, sort of.
Was.
Something.
All mankind he had to destroy. Why tell me about it? Yosef, you could have begun with Noach.
But did he...
Why tell me about it? It's okay to fail.
Yes.
If at first you don't succeed, David, try again, right? With the stock market, many people have lost money in the stock market, but they realized that loss turned into a win. And many people, when they got fired from their job, if they wouldn't have got fired from the job, then they would have gotten a better job. So many stories like that, yes? Yes?
So didn't Hashem rescue something from the world of the Mabul?
Yes, he built on the destruction.
He rescued Noach and his family.
That's right. So in every destruction, there's seeds of construction. I will repeat that. In every destruction, there's embedded the seeds of construction.
Did
yes.
he rescue anything from the other worlds, from the other 7?
I think there was a total destruction on this planet. There were 7 previous worlds. And so perhaps the dinosaur bones, the prehistoric dinosaur bones, and the Neanderthal man that are millions of years old, Evelyn, perhaps they come from what, David? From those previous worlds. This world is 6,000 years old. But on this world, Abraham, There was 7 other worlds, according to the Midrash in Kabbalah. And those worlds could have been millions of years ago. So perhaps the dinosaur bones and the Cro-Magnon bones come from what? Those previous worlds that existed on this planet. So there's no stira between the Torah and science, yes?
When you say world, you mean this world?
Contain previous civilizations,
Okay.
whatever,
And
creatures.
Those civilizations destroyed?
I'm starting over
But the
on this world.
The world itself is intact.
The world remained, but everything on it was destroyed. And then he started again. And Bereshis bara, Genesis 1, David, is the 7th cycle. In fact, the Zohar says, Sheva yipol tzaddik v'kam. The tzaddik falls 7 times and gets up. Who's the tzaddik? Kodesh Baruch Hu 7 times. It didn't work out for him. It didn't work out, but he didn't give up. He kept building. Until he finally said, this is Tov Ma'od. This is Tov Ma'od, David. The others were not Tov Ma'od. God loves man so much, he's willing to write about himself that what? That he failed, Kaviyachol, to give me chid. Look how much he loves man. It's okay to fail. Don't be too hard on yourself, God says. Look at me, Kaviyachol. I didn't give up. If at first you don't succeed, try again. Who taught us that, Elisheva? Who taught us that?
You did.
No, the big boss did. The big boss did.
So,
You hear what's going on over here?
so when we fail at something, we're really becoming educated about making distinctions.
That's right.
About what doesn't work and what.
That's right. Trial and error.
And transformation, I think, is maybe a little better word than destruction because it's changing a form to something to become more spiritual.
Nachon? Every invention came from what, Yosef? Failure. Ask Thomas Edison. This is a true story. You can Google it. Sir Isaac Newton, how did he discover the laws of gravity? This is not a joke. He was sitting underneath an apple tree, and a big apple fell down and hit him on the head and gave him a bump on the head. And he said, gee, why does the apple fall down and not up? The apple could have fallen up. So because he got a bump on the head, Avram, he discovered the laws of gravity. With no bump, no lump on the head, he wouldn't have discovered the laws of gravity. According to Kabbalah, Isaac Newton discovered the laws of gravity. What year was it? Anybody know Isaac Newton when he lived? But the Zohar knew about the laws of gravity 2,000 years ago. It's called the Koach HaMoshech, the Zohar said. The Koach HaMoshech. And whatever's true in the physical world is certainly true in the spiritual world. In the physical world, we have to fight to free ourselves. The gravity is pulling us down. And we have to what? Fight to rise up. And that's a muscle. The Yeitzer Hara is like the Koach HaMoshech. It's trying to what? Drag us down by gravity. And we have to what? Fight. So everything is parallel. In the physical world, the parallel in the spiritual world. So everything you build in the world, you have to destroy first. You want a beautiful leather coat. You want a beautiful mink coat. Yossi, what do you got to do? You have to kill an animal. Kill the animal, destroy the animal, skin it, take the hide and what? Thrash it, and then you have a beautiful leather jacket. Remember the Fonz, a leather jacket? All right? First destroy in order to build. If that's true in the physical world, it's certainly true also what? In the spiritual world and vice versa. We build on our sins. We all make errors, but we learn. But the first thing is we have to admit and realize that it's what? A sin. The Yeitzer Hara, strange Gemara in Chulin, Yehuda, the Yeitzer Hara, Satan, the Sar Shel Esav. Remember the all-night wrestling match with Yaakov Avinu all night long? Who was that mysterious wrestler? It was Satan. It was the Yeitzer Hara. And the Talmud in Chulin says he appeared to Yaakov as a Talmud Chacham with a shtreimel. Are you getting this? I thought he appeared like a mugger, in torn jeans with the open shirt, He appeared like a Talmud Chacham. The Yeitzer Hara appeared in a Bekesh and a Kapata. Gemara in Chulin, page 91. What's going on? The Yeitzer Hara appeared like a Torah scholar? What's the message over here? The Yeitzer Hara tells us, terrible sin of Lashon Hara, terrible sin. But that guy, it's a mitzvah to speak about him. It's a mitzvah to speak Lashon Hara about him. Person doesn't know he's destroying and sinning. How can he do tshuva? That Jew, it's a mitzvah to hate him. The Yeitzer Hara is a master of disguise. He convinces us it's a mitzvah to hate that Jew, to speak Lashon Hara about that Jew, or to yell at your spouse. So you never do tshuva. In Yiddish, afruma Yeitzer Hara. How do you say that in English? Afruma Yeitzer Hara.
Religious.
A religious Yeitzer Hara. This idea goes so far in Judaism. Hanoch, you're going to like this. Sfirat Omer. We count Omer, right, between Pesach and Shavuos. It's supposed to be a happy time. The 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuos, it's a preparation for what? For Kabbalah Torah. It's supposed to be a very happy time. The Jews were counting up, not counting down, right? 1 day closer to Kabbalah Torah. But it's also Yemei Avelut. It's days of what, David? Of mourning. We practice semi-mourning. You don't get married. You grow your beard. Because of the Talmidei Rabbi Kiva, 24,000 students, Rabbi Kiva died. What a tragedy. These two opposite emotions. On the one hand, David, it's a chana for Kabbalah Torah. The Jews were counting up, ready or not, getting ready for the great giving of the Torah. On the other hand, we have to practice mourning for Rabbi Kiva's Talmidim that couldn't die no other time. Dafka, these 7 weeks between what? Pesach and Shavuos? What's going on? What's the message over here? The whole soul of Chag Matan Torah. Kabbalah Torah. We got the Torah 7 weeks after the Exodus, right? 40 days later, this week's Parsha, 40 days later after we got the Torah, what happened? Golden calf disco. One tragedy. The second tragedy, Moshe came down the mountain and he what? And he broke God's handiwork. A double disaster. Why do you celebrate Chag HaShavuos for? David, what are you celebrating? A double disaster. 40 days after Shavuos, we worshiped the golden calf. Moshe came down, broke the tablets. Why celebrate Shavuos for? It resulted in a double tragedy. The Egel and Moshe broke the tablets. What are we celebrating for? This is the same idea, Chava, says Rav Tzadok. Boina olamoisu machrivan. Even Kabbalah Torah, even the giving of the Torah, had to be built on what? Failure. Who said that? Failure. And then we built. Moshe had to break the tablets. Moshe had to break the tablets. Boina olamoisu machrivan. The binyan built on what? On destruction. So Moshe Rabbeinu, he had to smash the tablets. There had to be failure, because only after the failure, we'll see later, came great success. This idea goes so far. Now, the Gemara Menachah says that if God wouldn't have given the Torah to Moshe, who would he choose? Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva was almost like Moshe Rabbeinu. According to Kabbalah, Moshe was the father of the written Torah, and Rabbi Kiva was the father of? Beautiful. I'm glad you came today. So just like Moshe had his broken tablets, Rabbi Kiva had his broken tablets. What were his broken tablets? 24,000 Talmidim were broken. Moshe didn't give up. He went and got the second tablets, which we'll see are much greater than what? Than the first. And Rabbi Kiva, after the 24,000 Talmidim died, Yaakov, he could have said, forget about it. I'm a failure. He ordained two of the greatest rabbis, Rab Meir and Rab Shimon. The entire Mishnah that we have today, Avram Berkowitz, Tam Mishnah Rab Meir, and all of the Kabbalah and the Zohar is according to Rab Shimon. So if Rabbi Kiva would not have failed by losing the 24,000 Talmidim Chanoch, in his old age, he never would have ordained Rab Meir and Rab Shimon. The pillars of the Zohar and the Mishnah only became because he failed first. His 24,000 Talmidim let him down. He started over with Rab Meir, the father of the Mishnah, and Rab Shimon, the father of what? The Zohar. But that came after he failed with his 24,000 Talmidim. He didn't give up. He could have said, I'm a failure. Forget about it. I'll retire.
What did they do wrong?
Well, they didn't give proper cover to each other. What does that mean?
Respect.
They were jealous. They couldn't see the forest for the trees. They were so much into what? Into learning, they couldn't see the Tzelem Elohim and the other guy. They were too much focused on their own, Selam Aleihim. You're nothing. I'm great. Great people have great egos and great Yeitzer Hara. So because they were so great, they didn't give proper cover to their fellow Jew. Because they figured that nobody's as good as I am. So Rabbi Kiva failed, but he didn't give up. Just like Moshe didn't give up. What are Rabbi Kiva's second tablets? What Rabbi Kiva's second tablets were? Rab Meir and Rab Shimon. Rab Meir, the father of the Mishnah, and Rab Shimon, the father of the Zohar. So only by trial and error do we become better. David, only by trial and error do we become better. We turn Chorban into Binyan. We turn destruction into what? Building. Like Hashem did. With the 7 worlds he destroyed, and the Mabul, he destroyed the whole world, and he's starting over. Who sang that? Starting over. Like Moshe, like David and Bathsheba, like Rabbi Akiva, we got to see through the skies of the Yeitzer Hara. The greatest disguise is you're a failure. You'll never amount to nothing anyway. You might as well stay in the disco. That's his disguise. Despair. How do you say Yush in English?
Despair.
Thank you. Despair. That's the Yeitzer Hara in disguise. You'll never amount to anything anyway. Why try? You're hopeless. That's the Yeitzer Hara's disguise. So the first thing, you have to admit the sin and realize that what? I can become better. I don't have to remain in the disco. But the first thing is you don't justify the sin by saying it's a mitzvah. Because the Yeitzer Hara says, that Jew, it's a mitzvah to speak Lashon Hara on him. About that Jew, Sinas Chinam and Machlokus is okay. That's Yeitzer Hara in disguise. That rabbi, it's okay to speak about. This rabbi, it's okay to speak about. That's the Yeitzer Hara. Afruma, how do you say Afruma Yeitzer Hara? Yeitzer Hara dati, hu dati. We all make errors in our homes with our spouses. Don't justify your mistake. Admit and learn to do better because of the error. Because of the error. Now, how can we tell whether the Yeitzer Hara has us, Avram? How can we tell? This is a test. I'm talking to myself. How can we see through the disguise of the Yeitzer Hara? In the home. If you want to know in the home, if the Yeitzer Hara has you, the siman is you're yelling and screaming at your spouse. And the louder you holler, the more wrong you are. Even though you think you're 100% right, your spouse messed up, she screwed up, whatever. But the louder you yell and the more you think you're right, that's the Yeitzer Hara in disguise. It's the Yeitzer Hara who makes you angry and tells you you're right to be yell and angry. How do we know it's the Yeitzer Hara? Because the Yeitzer Tov, Derocheo Darkei Noam. The Yeitzer Tov doesn't holler and yell, right, Vachmiel? The Yeitzer Hara, Derocheo, the ways of the Torah, Darkei Noam. How do you say that in English? Pleasant and sweet. Pleasant and calm. If you're hollering, no matter how right you think you are, it's what? It's the Yeitzer Hara masquerading as a chassid who tried to bring Jacob down. The Gemara at Chulin 90 said he was wearing a shtreimel. A shtreimel. He was dressed as a Torah scholar. Satan, who was wrestling with Father Jacob. The wrestling match. Yes.
The Yeitzer Hara in itself.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of man?
The Yeitzer Hara is an angel from Hashem.
Right?
The Yeitzer Hara cannot be evil.
Yes, he can.
You're asking a good question. His job is to tempt us. The Yeitzer Hara, right? He's to tempt us to do evil, right? He's neutral because he's a robot. But his job is to tempt us to do evil. Very good point, Yosef.
Okay,
he's not evil because he's a robot. But his job is to tempt us to, because if without the temptation to be evil, David, you can't be great. What makes a person great? The struggle with evil.
Resistance.
Who said no pain, no gain? If you never experience the darkness, can you appreciate the light? If you don't experience the darkness, can you appreciate the light? So the evil is there to teach us what it means to what? To be good. If you don't have that contrast, you don't know what good is.
So there's another question before.
Good point.
Okay, you go back to 7 days of creation. The
Right.
7 worlds were destroyed, then you had the 7 days of creation.
Starting over. This is this cycle, seventh
This
cycle.
cycle.
Genesis 1. The other 6 worlds, we don't know. There's nothing, no written.
All right.
It's a medrash.
So our cycle.
Right.
Our cycle. All right. Get to the point with Noah and everything is destroyed and reburned
Right.
again. Why is the 7 days creation back then and not the 7 days creation? Why is that all not wiped out, that part?
It was wiped out. God started over with Noah.
We learn about that. We don't learn about the 7
You're
days
right.
before.
Why not?
So
It's a good
what's-
question. I don't know. Why does God not tell us about the 6 previous worlds, just about this failure with the Mabul? But the Medrash Rabbah and the Zohar say that there were 6 other failures. But that's not in the written Torah. I don't know why not.
Is it in the oral?
Tradition, it's the oral Torah, it's the Medrash, the Zohar, tradition. You also ask a good question. A lot of stuff is not in the written Torah. In fact, most of the Torah is not in the written Torah. The written Torah is written as a shorthand code,
Yeah.
right?
The oral is our love letter.
The oral is our love letter, right? The love letter, right?
Right.
The Gemara in Yuma says that the first temple was destroyed because the Jews committed the 3 cardinal sins. The 3 cardinal sins, what are they? Idolatry, murder, and sexual immorality. But that galut only lasted what? 70 years, and we came back. Gemara in Yuma 9 says the second temple, we didn't commit the 3 cardinal sins. We only committed sinat chinam. And that's 2,000 years. Chofetz Chaim says, I don't understand the Gemara in Yuma 9. Is sinat chinam worse than the 3 cardinal sins?
Yeah.
How could it be? The 3 cardinal sins, the galut Avram only lasted 70 years. And Bayesheni was destroyed because sinat chinam, and that's 2,000 years almost. So how could it be? How could sinas chinam be worse than sexual immorality and idol worship? Doesn't make no sense, says the Chofetz Chaim. Afruma Yeitzer Hara. Everybody knows that sexual immorality is wrong. Everybody knows that idolatry is wrong. But how do you say in English, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is what? Never heard that? Everybody knows sexual immorality is wrong, right? You have a taiva, but after 70 years, what you realize that you did wrong and you do tshuva. So you do tshuva, you fix it, you come back. But sinas chinam, says the Chofetz Chaim, is so destructive because the Yeitzer Hara tells you that you, it's a mitzvah to hate him. That you, it's a mitzvah to speak against him. So sinas chinam, it's not worse than the 3, but it's self-perpetuating. How do you say that in English? You think it's a mitzvah. Everybody knows that sexual immorality is wrong and idolatry is wrong. So after 70 years you do tshuva. But sinas chinam aloshen hara, says the Chofetz Chaim, the Yeitzer Hara in disguise tells you what? That it's what? It's a mitzvah to speak and hate that Jew. So you'll never do tshuva because you think it's a mitzvah. That's the Satan in disguise. Don't fall for it. So that's our test. There's nothing wrong with failure if it leads to success. Even Yitzchak Avinu, the great patriarch Yitzchak, was fooled by Esav. Esav deceived him. But then he realized, it says, Vayechvad Yitzchak charada gadola. Yitzchak realized his mistake and he became a Haredi. He realized that Esav what? Deceived him. So even Yitzchak, the great patriarch, the Ola Tamima on the sacrifice, he became a korban Ola to Hashem. He was deceived by Yitzchak, by his son Esav, and yet he did tshuva. There's an amazing pasuk in Pashas Vayikra by the korban asham. Certain sins a person has to bring a korban asham. How do you say that in English? A guilt offering for certain sins. It says something very strange. You can look it up. Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 5. Nefesh kitechta. When a soul sins, a person in Tanakh is always called a nefesh. What does a nefesh mean? A soul. I'm not my bodysuit. Person's in the neshama. A soul sins, va'asta achas mikol mitzvahs Hashem, and he transgresses one of the mitzvahs of God, asher lo ta'asena, that you should not do. You understand this verse? Yosef, you getting this? Leviticus 5. A person sins and he transgresses one of the mitzvahs that you shouldn't do. You understand that?
That's weird.
Isn't that weird? It should say, Vos ta'achas mikol averot, asher lo ta'asena.
Right.
Hello?
The mitzvahs that we shouldn't do.
It said, a person sins and he does one of the mitzvahs that you shouldn't do.
Right.
But the mitzvah you should do.
Right.
It should have said he does one of the sins that you shouldn't do.
Right.
But no, it says, Bila, Vos ta'achat mikol mitzvot Hashem, asher lo ta'asena, that you should not do. Why say mitzvah you shouldn't do? It's averos you shouldn't do. It's the Yeitzer Hara tells you it's a mitzvah.
Or maybe.
You think it's a mitzvah to yell at your wife or to speak lashon hara about your friend, but lo ta'asena, don't fall for his disguise. He tells you it's a mitzvah, don't do it. It's not a mitzvah. It's the Yeitzer Hara in disguise as a mitzvah, but it's not. What?
Or maybe it's.
Otherwise, you say avera you shouldn't do. If I say mitzvah you shouldn't do.
Theirs.
What?
Somebody taking a mitzvah that's not really theirs.
What do you mean?
It
It says doing a mitzvah you shouldn't do. Mitzvahs you should do. Should have said you're doing an avera you shouldn't do.
Right, but
So the Farshim say it means that the Yeitzer Hara's trick. He's telling you it's a mitzvah. Don't do it. It's not a mitzvah to yell at your spouse.
right. But there's also women's mitzvahs that men shouldn't do, and men's mitzvahs that women
Okay, but
shouldn't
that's not a mitzvah. If you're not doing it, it should be an avera.
do. It should be called an avera,
But it's
not.
called a mitzvah.
It's a mitzvah.
So this is the Satan's disguise. He disguises the sin as what? What? How could you tell? If you're angry and you're yelling. If you're angry and you're yelling, you know it's what? A sin.
If you can't.
Because it's a mitzvah, derechel darkei noam. The ways of the Torah, Rabbi Shawat, pleasant and sweet and calm. You don't have to yell. If you're yelling, even with righteous indignation, it's not a mitzvah, it's a sin. That's the test. It's a test. Righteous indignation, you got your dander up. But if you're yelling, it's what? A sin, even though he tells you that what? It's a mitzvah. That's the test.
Rabbi,
So we can't.
Isn't that amazing? That's the test. Hashem himself tells us, I built the world, 6 other worlds, and even this world didn't work out. I had to destroy and starting over. Hashem teaches us, Boina Lomos Machrivan. God himself destroyed worlds. He built worlds to destroy them. And we have Alachta B'drachav. We have to walk in God's ways. Only after we destroy can we what? Build better.
Rabbi, the Yeitzer,
You hear that? V'lachta b'drachav. This idea goes so far, fasten your seatbelts. You can't leave early today. This is a game changer coming up. Yes?
the Yeitzer Hara is not only limited to the Jewish people. The Yeitzer Hara,
Every person
every
has.
person.
Otherwise, you're not human. Otherwise, you're a robot.
So the hatred we're experiencing now within the Christian world is all the Yeitzer Hara.
And in Muslim world, right? The Muslim world, not just the Christian world. The explosion of anti-Semitism, but this is God's game plan to what? To get the Jews come home.
Yeah.
Because Mashiach is very close.
Yeah.
And Mashiach cannot come, says the Vilna Gaon, until the majority of Jewish people leave Borough Park and Lakewood. So this, I think, my humble opinion of him, God orchestrates this worldwide explosion of anti-Semitism all over the world at this time, because Mashiach is coming. All the great Kabbalists say that now is the time, but he can't come until the Jews what? Come on. So this is God's game plan. I'm coming home, I'm coming home. Otherwise, why all of a sudden a worldwide explosion at that time? Why now? All over the world. Even what? In Pittsburgh, even in Crown Heights. All of a sudden, what's happening? Mashiach is coming. Very close. So this is Hashem's game plan.
One way or another,
What?
the majority is going to be here.
What?
One way or the other.
Otherwise, they won't come home. Right? They won't come home.
If they won't.
Right? So Hashem says, you leave me no choice. You can pay me now or maybe later. Right? The Yitzchak Kaduri Zatzal, he passed away not that long ago. He said, Yidden, what are you waiting for? Hashem is giving you so many signs, and if you don't come peacefully, Nebuch, you're going to come running. Running with your shirt on your back.
I got a question.
Go ahead.
The Jews getting murdered and slaughtered here in Israel, what kind of a siman is that for the Jews in Chutzlaretz? Is that a siman to come
It's safer here than anywhere. Safer here than in Pittsburgh. Not safer here than Pittsburgh?
People are deciding whether they should come to Israel.
It's much safer here. Look at the statistic. It's much safer here. Statistic-wise, right?
Arabs, they're like disgusting.
Okay, but that's our test. But this is our homeland. We belong here. So anyway, we have to learn from our mistakes, Avram. We have to admit our mistakes, not be ashamed, not say, no, I'm not wrong. Worse than the sin is to say what? Rabbi Yaakov, worse than the sin is to say what? It's not, I didn't sin. Shaul HaMelech and David both sinned. How come Shaul lost the kingdom and David didn't?
Justified himself.
Shaul said, I didn't sin. I did what you said, God.
Yeah, right.
Passed the buck to the people. David said, Chatasi, I sinned. That's the only difference. Shaul tried to deny and pass the buck. The people maybe do it, I didn't do it. Worse than the sin is to deny the sin. Because then you'll never do tshuva. If you deny it's a sin, you'll never do tshuva. It's self-perpetuating sin. So Shaul is out. David sinned, perhaps a worse sin than Shaul. But he said, Chatasi. He got up and he admitted, yes, I sinned.
What's the sin?
What with Shaul?
David.
David, even though technically she had a get, Bathsheba had a get, but nobody knew about it. Right? And still, you don't go doing that when you have the husband sent off to the front, then you take the wife, even though technically she had a get, it was a chil Hashem the way he did it. Right? You don't do it that way. Even though she had a get, you don't do it. It's not proper for a king of Israel, especially David, to do that. So even though technically it was not adultery, but it was sure a chil Hashem.
How should he have done it?
How should he have done it?
Should have left her alone.
You should have left her alone and wait what? And wait for Uriah to come back. She already had a get.
Yeah.
Right? And then take her. Right?
Take her when her husband came back.
She had a get. She was a divorced woman.
Yeah.
But the husband is in the foxholes, under fire. Is that proper? The husband, the ex-husband, is in the foxholes. You take the ex-wife. It's not good for morale. It's not good for morale, right?
Was he killed too by mysterious circumstances?
Who? He had Uriah knocked off. He was more of the Malchus, but still he should have put him on trial. Uriah was a rebel against the crown, but he shouldn't have knocked him off that way. He should have had him stand trial. So whatever he did, even though he did the letter of the law, he certainly did not do spirit of the law. And the greater a person is, the greater what? Hashem holds him accountable.
Right.
Yes?
What about Abigail? Was she married?
No, Abigail, he took Abigail when she was a widow.
She was a widow.
Right? He kicked the bucket. He kicked the bucket, remember?
That's right.
And then he married her, Abigail, right?
Who's Abigail's husband?
Novo. A lowlife, like his name was. So he died of a stroke, and then Abraham married his widow.
And
So where were we? What?
Bathsheba's husband was a traitor to...
He was a traitor to the crown. If you read the Nachas, he was a traitor to... So he deserved to be executed, but not in the underhanded way. You send him off in the foxholes, had him knocked off. Should put him on trial for treason.
Because David had him have to go to the front.
Right? No, he was a Morib Malchus. He was a rebel against the crown, Uriah. But David should not have knocked him off in such an underhanded way. You should have put him on trial. But anyway, David confessed, and therefore he did not lose his kingdom. Shaul HaMelech tried to cover up his sin, and that's worse than the sin itself, and therefore he lost the kingdom. So our message is we have to learn and admit our mistakes, Avram, and as you always say, onwards and upwards. Only after you fall 7 times and get up, says Mishlei, only then are you called what? A tzaddik. If a child never falls, Yosef, will he ever learn how to walk? If you don't let a child fall, will he ever learn how to walk? He'll be a cripple.
What if you fall 8 times and get up?
1 minute. 7 means many. Evan Herzl says it means many in Tanakh. Where was I? Whatever's true in the physical world of Yaakov is certainly true in the spiritual world. if a child doesn't fall, he'll never learn how to walk. He'll be crippled. If a person doesn't fall in the spiritual world, he'll be a spiritual cripple. How do I know? Look at the child. Whatever's true in the physical world, Avram, is certainly true what? Because the physical world is only a reflection of what? A spiritual world. It's amazing how it's parallel. Zeh umazeh shalahim. It's a pasuk in Koheles. Zeh umazeh. God created the physical world and the spiritual world as what's called the matrix? No, the parallel worlds. Parallel worlds. So, we will never learn how to walk spiritually if you don't fall. This idea goes so far. This week's Parsha of Yaakov. The Jews built a golden calf. This week's Parsha, no? Moshe got the Shekhinah on his face. When did he get the Shekhinah on his face? The first tablets? Why? The first tablets, the Jews were goody two-shoes. Moshe came down, no Shekhinah on his face. Before the Chet HaEgel, we were perfect. But dafka only by the second tablets. After the Chet HaEgel, after our tshuva, when God gave us the second tablets, we got to see or hear the Shekhinah. Every time we saw Moshe's face, what did we see? The Shekhinah. And every time Moshe opened up his mouth, whose voice did we hear, Avram? Shekhinah midaberes v'togrono shel Moshe. We got a double bonus because of the sin. It's very bizarre. The first time, we only heard God's voice. How long? 10 Commandments, 45 minutes. How long did it take God to speak? How long did it take him to speak? And we saw him for 45. How long did it take to speak the 10 Commandments? An hour and a half? Maybe, right? But after the sin of the Chet HaEgel, after the sin, the second tablets, we got to see the Shekhinah not once, but every time we looked at Moshe's face, we saw the Shekhinah for 40 years on Moshe's face. And every time Moshe opened up his mouth, whose voice did we hear? So that only happened when? After the sin. It's bizarre. We gained from the sin. Are you getting this? Because before the sin, no Shekhinah on Moshe's face. We didn't hear God's voice through Moshe's mouth. That only came after the sin and after the tshuva with the second tablets. We got a double bonus. What's the message? Success and spiritual growth can only come after what? Trial and error. It's not a license to sin, don't get me wrong, but everybody sins. Everybody. What do you do afterwards?
I guess we have to take advantage of it.
We'll talk about the Babich Rebbe. Gemara in Gittin 43 says, Ein Adam Omet al Torah Ela al Keim Nichshal. A person cannot really become attached to the Torah unless first he's nichshal. How do you say that in Hebrew, English? In English, nichshal. He fails.
As a failure.
Our past sins can become opportunities through which we can what? Climb to spiritual heights that we could not rise to without the sin first. Rav Soloveitchik says the golden calf becomes a golden opportunity for tshuva. Rav Soloveitchik says the golden calf became a golden opportunity for tshuva. The Gemara in Yuma 86 says, you do tshuva mehava, all of your averis become what? Mitzvahs. It's mind-boggling.
I thought the people who sinned, they all died.
The 3,000 people that sinned, right, they were executed. But the rest of the people sinned by letting it happen. The rest of the people sinned by letting it happen. So the actual worshippers, they had to be executed. But everybody just stood by. Who said all it takes for evil to flourish is for good people to do nothing? I think Churchill said that.
Yeah.
So the people just stood by and let it happen. But they did tshuva mehava. Right? So a person does tshuva mehava, his sin becomes a win. And the Rambam says in Hilchos Tshuva, in the place where a Baal Tshuva stands, a tzaddik gomer cannot reach. A Baal Tshuva stands much higher than what? Than a goody two-shoes. Why is that? Because a goody two-shoes doesn't know what's out there. He doesn't know how delicious bacon is or cheeseburger. He doesn't know what he's missing. But a Baal Tshuva knows that bacon and cheeseburger is delicious, and he has the willpower to what?
To stay away from
To stay away. Self-control, God appreciates that. according to the pain, is?
The gain.
That's the shortest Mishnah in Shas. Nechama. 4 words. According to the pain is the gain. Lefum tzara agra. According to the pain is the gain. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says something amazing. Lekita Suchot. He says that the golden calf was a golden setup. You hear this? God set us up to fail. Why was Moshe late? They thought he's late. Remember the Medrash says the Jews saw a coffin with Moshe there. Why did God allow that? Satan was carrying a coffin with Moses. Remember that, David? Do you remember that, Rashi? The Jews thought that Moses is dead. Satan showed them a coffin. Why did God set us up? To fail. Because only when you fail and you do tshuva, you become what? Greater. Our past sins can become opportunities through which we can climb to spiritual heights that we never would have reached without the sin. David HaMelech wrote his most beautiful Tehillim only after his sin with Bathsheba. David is the Mashiach, the Savior of all mankind, because David taught us how to turn a sin into a win. Mashiach is going to save all mankind, not just the goody two-shoes. Mashiach, look in the book of Isaiah, in Zechariah, Mashiach is not just going to save the Jewish people, he's coming to save all mankind. So he has to identify with what? With sinners. So he himself had to be a sinner to show that what? You can sin and turn the sin into a win. That's why he is the Mashiach. Dafke King David. Huh?
Master of Tshuva.
The master of Tshuva. The poster boy of Tshuva. He didn't write his most beautiful Psalms. He wrote when, Chava? After he sinned. If he wouldn't have sinned with Bathsheba, he never would have had those beautiful Psalms of Tshuva. It's not a license to sin, don't get me wrong, but everybody sins. But what do you do after you sin? Do you mope? Is that the right word? Mope? Yeah. Or grope? Or gripe? Mope. Or fall into despair? That's Satan in disguise? Or say, no, I'm going to do better. I'm going to build on my failure. I'm going to turn a sin into a win. Who taught us that? Before King David.
Moshe Rabbeinu.
Before Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem, when he built the worlds and destroyed them, even this world was a washout for him. Literally a washout. Did he give up? No. He rolled up his big sleeves and he said, we'll start over with Noach. Adam, it's a pasuk in Koheles. Adam ein tzadik ba'aretz asher ya'aseh tov v'lo yechta. There's no human being on the face of the earth that doesn't sin. Everybody sins.
Every day.
Adam ein tzadik ba'aretz. There are 4 people an exception that never sinned. Who are the 4? I'm glad you asked. David's father Yishai.
Joseph.
No, David's father Yishai. David's son Kilov. Ever heard of him? David's son Kilov. Amram, the father of what? Moshe. And Benjamin ben Yaakov. Who's greater, Amram or Moshe? Amram never sinned. Moshe sinned. Who's greater, Yishai or David? Yishai never sinned and David did. Who's greater, Yaakov Avinu or his son Benjamin? Who's greater, Yaakov or his son Benjamin? So how come Benjamin never sinned and Yaakov did? Huh? And Kilov ben David, you ever heard of him? Kilov ben David, he never sinned. Huh? Who knows about him? David is much greater than his father and greater than his son, even though his father never sinned and his son never sinned, and he sinned more than once, and yet he's the Messiah.
That's right.
What a powerful message. Let's go for it.
But we have to take responsibility first.
Of course, first you have to admit. Don't pass the buck like Saul did. Shaul HaMelech passed the buck. And therefore he was a failure. He didn't admit. First you have to admit that it's a sin. Takes courage. People don't like to admit that it's a sin. Because they yell. The more they yell, they think the more right they are. But that's a sign that what? That you're wrong.
Right.
The louder you yell in righteous indignation, the louder you're wrong, even though you say you're what?
Right.
Satan whispers in your ear, you're right, you're right, you're right. How do you know when you're right?
When you're wrong.
How do you know when you're right? Derechel darkei noyam. If you speak calmly and pleasantly, and not with anger, then you know you're right. But if you're angry and you're yelling and hollering, you're dead wrong. That's a sign that Satan got you. So let's go for it, guys.
For more of Rabbi Sprecher's teachings, visit rabbisprecher.com.